Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is the Ultimate Torque Bug 3.0. Well guys, this is going to be a big one. Today, we're going to take a look at installing one of these larger single piston hydraulic brakes. These ones have the larger pads on them, and this is something you might find on a scooter or a pit bike. It's got a bigger reservoir. It's for the left side gripper, which is good because the Hornet release is on the right. I've already loosened the banjo bolt so that I was able to move this thing around and try to get an idea of what I wanted to do. It released a little pressure. That came out, and it may have lost a little bit of fluid. I cleaned it up. I'll take this out. It's only hand tight, and I'll get the bolt itself with the two washers. I'll separate the brake line, and then I'll put the bolt and the two washers back in the hole for safekeeping. I also don't want to ming up any of my threads, so that'll help protect them. With the plethora of this anaconda draped precariously over the shelf there, we have what we're after. Take this over to the frame and try to figure out how to position it. I think it's going to go like that. Yeah, something like that. Well, on this particular frame, I suppose you have two options. You could go the outside or the inside. Well, if we go to the inside, we're going to have more protection, and we're not in the way of anything. I don't think there's any need to have an exhaust system come straight down here. So, that said, nothing's ever going to go there except for this brake caliper. If we put it over the rotor, it's obviously not going to go that deep, but well, I guess it's not going to stay there. If I sit back here and somewhat line it up, you can see we're going to need some sort of a hanger that can go to those two bolt holes. There's one down by my finger, and here's the other one by my thumb. So if we line it up from the top and look down, it seems to me that if we hang something in line with this tab right down here, and this whole thing, stays on just on the inside of the frame, we should be able to hang this from it. We would just drill holes and our bolts would go through, and these are threaded. So let me try to make some kind of a template up here, and we'll get a better idea of what we're going to do. I think we can incorporate this axle hanger though. I'm really glad I left that. If I'm going to use this tab some way, and our hanger is going to be out here somewhere. It's actually going to be like here, the way I'm picturing it. We're going to need some sort of a triangle shape thing, and it doesn't have to be completely the size of our square. So if we cut something that looks like a square but smaller, yeah, they call it a triangle. Let me cut one of those. Armed with my trusty scissors, I'm slowly cutting the shape that's going to fit down here. I made sure that it overhangs so that we'll have something to weld to, and I'm getting kind of close to where I'm going to have to figure out how to make the section where the actual brake itself is going to go. And that is the confusing part. So, somehow I got to figure out where one point goes and then work off of that. We're going to start with the lowest point down by my thumb and go from there. So I think I'll just mark across the top of this or something so that I know where the frame is. And then, yeah. Okay, so that's what I got. I'm going to convert this to cyborg meat. Probably. I hope I have some kind of 3/16 or something. I don't want to have to cut this at 1/4 inch if I don't have to. It only needs 2 holes drilled, but all of this jazz right on here is, well, that's not going to be fun to say the least. So, when I do get this cut, I'm going to be very careful. I'm going to drill 1 hole first, and then I'll pivot the thing into place, meaning the caliper itself, and then make sure that I mark the center for the second hole. That way I'm not cattywampus and getting too messy with it. First time, guys. See what happens. I actually think this is going to work. So, exactly like I said is exactly as I did. Everything seems to be lining up. My brake shoes are definitely going to get all kinds of rotor action. See the brake shoe on the back side there? I'm going to have to space this so that the caliper sits over the rotor, but we're going to have a very nice solid mount. Once I have this adapter welded to the frame, I'm going to look at trimming off this lobe up here. The reason I'm leaving that for now, well, I'm stick welding, and it's going to help me to have a nice place for my negative lead. I'm going to be able to weld to the axle hanger over here and here on both sides, and I can come along the bottom of the frame and the sides where it connects to it. On the template that I made, you can see this line here. That marks the tube on the frame itself. There might be something on the bottom that hangs down that will trim. We'll see. But to get better adhesion to the frame itself, to keep this thing from twisting and whatnot, we're going to try to get some face welds right up in here. So I'll drill 1, 2, probably 3 holes, evenly apart. That way we can do some rosettes when we're putting this thing on. So I'll get those drilled, and then I'm going to clean this up, get all the scale off of it. It is crazy cold today. We're not even going to break 30. But I got my holes drilled, those rosettes along the bottom. Everything's cleaned off and ready to be welded. The next thing I have to prepare is the area that's going to be welded. At this point, I'm going to remove that rear wheel assembly again and just put it off to the side for now. We're getting there. I'm going to take the seat off too. That way I don't ruin it. Got it all cleaned up. I'm ready to weld. I'm going to try to keep everything on plane with this axle hanger. I might have to do some kind of shim action down in here, but I'm not sure yet. The frame does have a little bit of flex, even though we have these corner pieces. It still comes together a little bit, and that'll give it a little pitch, so keeping all those things in mind. I just finished cleaning up my first pass. Get some real nice deep roots in there, and everything looks nice and plain. We're not touching where these 2 holes are, but where it planes out, we're just about touching up here on the frame. So probably tack right here, wrap it around, and just stay away from this. This is going to be plenty strong. I got it all cleaned up. I just freestyled that corner there and rounded everything out. So that said, I'm going to attempt to put the axle and rear wheel back on. With the rear wheel on, the caliper in hand, I'm placing the 2 pads over the rotor, and when I'm in the center, I can see that I'm going to need at least 2, maybe 3 washers to space this bracket off of the back face of our new brake bracket. So, we get that set up. See if I can't bolt it on. Remember, these are threaded, so we go bolt however many washers and then right into this. Both of my bolts are tightened. I ended up using 2 lock washers on both of them, and I'm pretty much right in between the brake pads. We have a very slight rub. I'm just a little bit out on the top, so I'll remember that before I paint this thing. I'll give it a couple rap-a-taps just to take the curse off it. Another thing I could do is use different washers, kind of like a thick one, a thin one, or 2 thick ones, and a thin one and a thick one, and I can pitch the caliper ever so slightly. Choice number 3, it's so close, it'll self-clear. They're brake pads, guys. They're meant to do stuff like that. I have my banjo bolt tight, and I'm just roughly routing my brake hose. I have my reservoir ready to go. I'm going to have to take the top off and fill it and bleed it. Since I lost so much fluid from the caliper in the line, it's virtually impossible to fill a dry system from the reservoir back down to the caliper and build up the proper pressure to bleed this thing and create an operational system. So I have something coming in the mail. It'll be here later on, and we'll go through that together. I mentioned before I was going to remove the seat so I didn't ruin it. I took a closer look, and this one is dried out and showing signs where it's gonna bust open any ride now. So I'm gonna go ahead and replace this with something a little bit different. I think it's just 3 bolts. Might only be 2 hanging on. Nope, they're all there. I'll get those off. Yep. She was just about ready to go. Other than all these little tears and such, and being a little bit dirty, the foam and the plastic are in good shape, so we'll hold on to this thing. With the seat out of the picture, we can finally address this gas tank. I got this on my vintage mini bike. It was used, it wasn't leaking. I used it, it didn't leak, so we're just going to continue its life. I know that these are readily available. They only cost about 25 bucks. The issue is, it's not designed for this style of frame whatsoever. We have these threaded studs that are connected to the tank, and if I line the back ones up just behind the front seat tab, like so, I can see that the back will sit down, but the front won't, because the studs will hit the frame. I'm not going to drill holes in my frame to set those studs through because, well, there'll be no threads on the other side. It would just be working as a pin, and, you know, it really doesn't make sense to do that when we can do something a whole lot easier. Leaving this tab right where it's at, I'm gonna add another tab just behind it. Kind of like extended tab, you know what I'm saying? And then I might add something up here as well. This is the original tab. I added this section in the back and this section in the front. Then marked out a couple spots where I'm going to make a couple holes. I drilled out my holes and I removed the front two studs from the gas tank. Now these two studs in the back can go in the new holes. If it's done just right, there's plenty of room for the petcock. It sits in the middle, and the handlebars don't touch. I'm going to get a piece of rubber and I'm going to cut it to sit on the face in between the two. And get those holes poked right in it. I have my piece of rubber cut out and pressed down over my studs. A couple washers, a couple nuts. I'm going to mount this thing. Sort of. From below, you can see where the studs come through. I have a washer and a nut on each one, and it's just loose right now. Everything looks good on the petcock. We'll be able to get our fuel line on there and turn this thing off on, and looks like it even has a reserve. Now we just got to find something to hold this down. I'll tell you what, I just tightened those two nuts on the bottom, and just those two back studs are really holding this thing well. In the long scheme of things, one of them would probably break off though from vibration and such, so we're going to stick with the plan. To hold this thing down, we're going to use this very basic ring clamp. This is a 7-inch There you go, 6 1/8 to 7 inch, and a 1 foot piece of 5/8 hose. You can go smaller, but it gets tricky feeding the clamp through. You can get, if you get the 1/2 inch, it's tight, you can make it work, but it's a bit of a fuss. So where we're going for easy, you know, things that can be replaced like that, we're going to keep it simple. I'm not even going to cut this down. 1 foot section. When I put this thing on for final assembly, I'll probably center my adjuster here right on the neck for the fuel filler. If it had a real long tail, I'd let the excess sideboard meat find its way back down into the hose on either side. It doesn't have to be overly tight. I don't mind the rubber coming up past this seam. We don't want to smush that. This is assisting the 2 studs back here. Once these 2 studs are completely tight, or as tight as we need them to be, they're going to control the tank. The rubber that we put on the bottom, rubber on the sides, this band, that's all helping take some of the stress off of those studs. So hopefully this thing will last a little bit. If it breaks, we're into $30 or less to get another setup. So that would include one of these. I should have known there'd be some hijinks since we're working with a doodle bug after all. Fortunately, this sort of worked in my benefit. I ordered these syringes and hoses off of Amazon. I opened them up and got to tinkering around and see what I was working with, because I was going to use this to reverse bleed the brake system. However, I came over to my hydraulic brake handle, I gave it a few pumps, lo and behold, it seems to be building pressure. So, I'm going to bleed this thing the traditional method and see how things turn out. The nice thing about these hydraulic brakes, you can see the fluid inside the reservoir. So when you're doing stuff like this, you can say, hey, I'm going to bleed it. I should probably fill it, right? Then pump it up. Then bleed it. So that way, this doesn't empty out all the way and get us right back to where we started. That's the plan anyway. Doodle bug. There's number 1. And there's number 2. That one had a little bit of air behind it. You can see the line moving. You can see the brake doing its thing. And this feels great. Push that out of the way. We're rolling. Just rubbing ever so slightly. She's locked right up. All right. we can probably make that adjustment in the washers. Before, I thought I was going to have to go in. Now it looks like I have to go back out ever so slightly. So if I use a lock washer and something that's a little thinner like a shim, then we should be perfect. Like I said, it breaks once that pad wears in. It's going to clearance itself anyway. Well, hopefully things keep going in our favor. Up next, we got to figure out how to install a custom seat. But we'll be all right, because as always, it's a work in progress. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.